The air hung heavy in the dimly lit room, thick with unspoken tension and the faint scent of old wood. The atmosphere was almost suffocating, as if the room itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to break the silence. A single lamp cast long, dancing shadows across the chessboard, illuminating the faces of the two players, Mila and Dane. The game was more than just a pastime. It was a silent conversation, a battle of wits where every move spoke volumes.
What's the matter, Dane? Afraid to make a move, or are you just stalling for time?
Mila, her dark eyes gleaming with sharp intelligence, tapped a long manicured fingernail against the polished surface of the table. Each tap was a reminder of her patience, her confidence, and her readiness to strike. Across from her, Dane sat rigidly, his gaze flickering nervously between the chessboard and Mila's unreadable expression. He could feel the weight of her stare, the pressure mounting with each passing second.
This feels wrong, Mila. Like there's more at stake than just the game.
Wrong? Or simply dangerous? Sometimes the two are one and the same.
Dane shifted uncomfortably, the tension in the room pressing down on him like a physical weight. He ran a hand through his already disheveled hair, a nervous habit that betrayed his inner turmoil. His eyes darted around the room as if searching for an escape, a way out of this high-stakes game. Dane swallowed, his Adam's apple bobbing nervously, the sound almost audible in the oppressive silence. He glanced back down at the chessboard, his fingers hovering over the pieces, each one a potential move that could change everything. He knew, in that moment, that this was more than just a game. It was a test of his resolve, a measure of his courage. This was a battle of wills, a test of loyalty, and he wasn't sure he was ready to play. But he knew he had no choice, the game had already begun and there was no turning back. Just like old times, Mila chuckled, her voice laced with a hint of something darker, something that sent a shiver down Dane's spine.
Remember our little game in Monte Carlo? You always were too hesitant, darling.
Dane's jaw tightened at the memory. He could practically hear the deafening roar of the crowd, the frantic pounding of his own heart as he stared down the barrel of a gun. It had been Mila, always cool and collected, who had disarmed the guard with a flick of her wrist and a blinding smile.
You hesitate, you falter. And in our line of work, hesitation gets you killed. Isn't that right, Dane?
Dane said nothing. He couldn't bring himself to speak, not with the ghost of that day in Monte Carlo still clinging to him like a shroud. He knew Mila was right, of course. He knew that in their world, trust was a luxury they couldn't afford. But still, a part of him yearned for something more, something resembling loyalty. The air in the room crackled with unspoken accusations, a palpable tension that seemed to thicken with every passing second. Dane stared at Mila, his gut twisting with a potent cocktail of anger and betrayal. He could feel the weight of their shared history pressing down on him. He remembered the bank heist, the adrenaline, the chaos, and the way everything had seemed to move in slow motion. The way her eyes had flickered to the vault just a second too long, a momentary lapse that had set off alarm bells in his mind. The way she'd insisted on taking point, her voice steady and confident, masking the true intentions that lay beneath. It was a calculated risk, she'd said, a chance to maximize their take. But Dane knew better. He'd seen the glint in her eyes, the hunger for more. He saw the greed that flickered beneath her cool facade, a greed that threatened to consume everything in its path. The way she looked at their team, their so-called family, as pawns in her own twisted game. Each move calculated, each person a piece to be sacrificed. He pushed the memory down, his fingers gripping the armrests of his chair, knuckles white with the effort to stay composed.
Loyalty? You want to talk about loyalty? The word dripped with sarcasm, a bitter reminder of broken promises. You who would sell out your own grandmother for a quick buck. The accusation hung in the air, heavy and undeniable.
Mila laughed, a sharp, humorless sound that bounced off the walls of the room, echoing the emptiness of her heart.
Don't be naive, Dane. Her voice was a cold whisper, cutting through the tension like a knife. Loyalty is a fairy tale, a bedtime story for those too weak to fend for themselves. Her words were a stark reminder of the world they lived in, a bedtime story for those too weak to fend for themselves. In this life, you look out for number one. Everyone else is expendable. In this life, you look out for number one. Everyone else is expendable. Her words echoed in his mind, a harsh truth he could no longer ignore.
Dane's blood ran cold. Her words hit him like a physical blow, each syllable a stark reminder of the darkness that lurked beneath Mila's alluring facade. It was as if a veil had been lifted, revealing the true nature of the woman he thought he knew. The room seemed to close in around him, the air thick with tension and unspoken truths. He had always known deep down that she was capable of great cruelty, but there had always been that sliver of doubt, that faint hope that maybe, just maybe, she cared for him as much as he cared for her. That hope now seemed foolish, a naive dream shattered by the harsh reality of her words. A bitter laugh escaped his lips. It was a laugh filled with irony and regret, a sound that echoed the turmoil within him. How could he have been so blind, so willing to ignore the signs that were always there?
You're wrong, Mila. There are still people in this world who believe in something more than just themselves, people who hold on to ideals, who fight for something greater, who stand by each other through thick and thin, people who would die for each other without a second thought. They are the ones who give this world hope, who remind us that not everything is lost.
Mila raised an eyebrow, a flicker of amusement dancing in her eyes. She seemed almost entertained by his earnestness, as if his words were nothing more than a child's naive fantasy.
Oh, really? And what makes you so sure you're one of them? Her voice dripped with sarcasm, challenging him to prove his worth.
He didn't answer, not with words. Instead, he made his move, his fingers closing around his queen. The weight of the piece felt heavy in his hand, a symbol of the sacrifice he was about to make. He moved her across the board, sacrificing her in a bold, unexpected maneuver. It was a move that spoke volumes, a declaration of his resolve and his willingness to give up everything for what he believed in. A move that left Mila speechless, her carefully constructed facade crumbling for the briefest of moments. In that instant, Dane saw a flicker of vulnerability in her eyes, a crack in her armor that gave him a glimmer of hope.